First of all, it's very good to welcome you all here, and congratulations to, remind me of your name again, Michelle, for organising all of this and for instigating the idea. And apart from anything else, I'm here to relearn a lot of the issues because I was very heavily involved in some of these issues in my first parliament in this place between 2001 and 2005. And it's then that I got to know Andrew. And since then I've gone off into health and care issues and spent a lot of time campaigning on mental health in particular. But I now, having come out of government, want to return to focus some attention on this very important issue. I wanted to just say a word or two to start with about what my involvement had been back at that time, because I got to hear about a plan to sell or to grant an export license for the sale of a military air traffic control system to Tanzania. And I became aware that there appeared to be no justification for the sale of this equipment to a country that didn't have an air force, that didn't need a military air traffic control system. And I remember taking the issue up with Claire Short, who was then the Secretary of State for International Development, who it turns out was fighting a battle in government with Tony Blair and Jeff Hoon, the Defence Secretary, to stop this export license being granted. And I met with her, and she was very open with me about what was going on within government to facilitate this, what was inevitably a corrupt deal. I mean, that's the brutal truth of this. It was a sale by BAE Systems, financed at the time by Barclays Bank, who incidentally I don't think were ever properly held to account for their role in this. And the bottom line is that the sale went ahead despite protestations from people outside government and people like Claire Short fighting within government to stop it. And it demonstrated to me the closeness of the relationship between government and the arms trade. And the argument that is always used about jobs and the importance of protecting British jobs. It was only subsequent to that, perhaps 3 or 4 years later, after I exposed what was going on and had asked loads of parliamentary questions and written endless letters, that the Serious Fraud Office then got in touch with me to ask me to cooperate with their investigation into BAE Systems. And of course you will remember that this was the investigation that was famously stopped by Tony Blair, particularly the al-Yamami element of it, outrageously stopped because it, to me, undermined the rule of law by our own government. Subsequently, there was a sort of an agreed guilty plea to a lesser charge in relation to Tanzania, and it resulted in some reparations paid to that country. But this is one of the poorest countries in the world, which we had sold a complete white elephant to, because it was corrupt, because there were local officials who were profiting from the behaviour of BAE Systems. So I found that utterly shocking. I got to meet with Andrew Feinstein, who had done the most extraordinarily brave work as an MP in South Africa. And I read his book, and I got to know about how the electoral system in South Africa stops backbench MPs from speaking out because they know that they will immediately get thrown out of Parliament if they don't toe the party line. That didn't stop Andrew. So I've got great admiration for him and the work that he does. But bringing us now just quickly up to date, it seems to me that the events of Paris are an absolute demonstration that we are all at risk from this. Up until now, it's just people in the developing world who suffer the awful consequences of the sale of arms, which then filter down from state recipients into non-state players and into corrupt gangs. And there are tens of thousands of people who lose their lives in Africa in particular through the corrupt sale of small arms across that continent. 75% I think of sales of arms are to the developing world. And of course the crazy thing is that it completely undermines the money we spend on international development. So we make this big commitment, which I'm very proud of, that the last government committed and got to 0.7% of GDP spent on development assistance to the developing world. But some of that money is undermined, that spend is undermined by the sale of arms to both regimes that do not respect human rights, but also to regimes that then sell on arms to others who then use them to fuel conflict. And we have seen now what I believe is the start of a potentially massive trend of mass migration, in part fueled by conflict. Conflict fueled in turn by arms sold by members of the UN Security Council, including this country. And so this idea that it's in the national interest to maintain sales of arms to dodgy regimes and without a sufficient international legal framework in place. And the Arms Trade Treaty is a step in the right direction, but it is not the solution. It needs to go further than that. We need to look at the role of brokers, and Vince Cable, when he was Secretary for Business, launched a call for evidence on a register for brokers. I don't know where that's got to, probably nowhere. No. But this is the sort of further step that we absolutely need to take. We need to have guarantees against sales of weapons onward to other players, and we need to stop sales of arms to regimes with unacceptable human rights records. And I still fail to understand our obsession with Saudi Arabia. This is a country which is the source of much terrorism, and yet they are regarded as a key ally of this country. Sweden has taken a significant move in relation to Saudi Arabia. We ought to be doing the same thing. I have absolutely no expectation that this government will do, but we should be pressing for it. And the final thing I'd say is that for parliamentarians, our responsibility has to be to seek to hold governments to account, to ask questions, to challenge and to expose where bad things happen. The revolving door of people working in government ministers who then end up working for the arms trade with lucrative contracts, the cosy relationships between governments and arms dealers, and this assumption that the only criterion should be jobs for British workers, when actually our national security is ultimately undermined by the sale of arms to unacceptable regimes. Thank you.